welcome back to Room 237, and now I've come to the next to last Italian film that I'm doing, and it's the last Argento film that I'm doing. I did have two, but I'm saving Two Evil Eyes for when I do anthologies again, probably next October. But this is one I'm sure you guys have been waiting to see my thoughts on, and like the film, I'm sure it will disappoint, because I did not entirely hate this film, especially not as much as I thought I would, and it's 2007's Mother of Tears, which, yes, is the third and final chapter of the Three Mothers trilogy, starting with Suspiria in 77, Inferno in 1980, and then we got the 27-year gap. Now, yes, this has been colloquially known as, or commonly known as, his worst film. Now, I think if you mix in the hype and the anticipation and then how bad it was, I'm sure that plays into it. But if I'm just looking at what's a worst movie, I'd probably still have to put Dracula and Phantom of the Opera below this. It's funny because I've heard Mother of Tears and Giallo are like his absolute worst movies. Maybe because Phantom of the Opera and Dracula are no-brainers, like of course they're bad. But both of them I didn't entirely hate. I didn't hate Giallo. I didn't downright hate this. I do like Giallo more than this. And yeah, I would still have to put Dracula and Phantom of the Opera at his absolute bottom. But, so yeah, this movie was long awaited after Inferno. Apparently, Daria Nicolodi, I can't remember if they were ever married, but they were partners. They had a child, Ossia Argento, that's Ossia's mother. She was a frequent collaborator, appeared in many of his films, a lot of his best films, and sort of a creative partner. She wrote a script back around sometime in the early 80s, but there's a Fangoria interview in, I think, 84 that said they had worked on a script together, and it just had to be fine-tuned. And then it was years and years later that Argento said he had a script, but then that went nowhere. I think his script was going to take place immediately after Inferno and deal with a detective looking into these deaths at some university. I'm trying to remember how to pronounce, because it's spelled Mater, but I think they say Mater. Tenebrarum survived at the end of Inferno. So that was his original treatment. But then he got with these two other guys, or maybe that was their treatment. I don't entirely remember. And like that was 03, 04 Argento script. And then he got with Jace Anderson and, Adam Garash. They got together in Rome, and they helped him write it. And that became the film we got. Now, it stars... It has three different director credits, at least on Wikipedia. Stuart Till, Albert R. Broccoli, and Harry Saltzman. I don't know what that's about. There's apparently Albert Romulo Broccoli died in 96. So yeah, maybe he didn't want to have his name on it. I don't know. It was produced by Dario and Claudio Argento. And it stars Ossia Argento, Christian Solimeno, Adam James, Maureen Attias, Valeria Cavalli, Felipe Leroy, and Daria Nicolodi, and Udo Kier, which Daria Nicolodi is reprising her role as the Countess Elisa from Inferno. Udo Kier is not reprising his role from Suspiria. But, and yeah, this movie doesn't have the strongest story. I mean, one thing I can give it is, okay, it's the third in the trilogy. You gotta raise the stakes and give it a feeling of finality. But, and I will say, Suspiria and Inferno, those witches were pretty easy to stop. You know, Suspiria, the threat was really confined to the dance academy. Inferno, I always have a hard time remembering the ending to Inferno, even though I like that film. But I don't think that was the stakes were very high in that. This involves all of Rome. I mean, all of Rome is now committing mass suicides, acts of murder, violence, cannibalism, mass hysteria. But she's really easy to defeat as well. So at least the stakes are raised. I can give it that. But the thing about those movies is, okay, story was never that important, so I'm not going to crap too much on the story, as silly as it is. But I will criticize the visual aspect, because Argento is very masterful when it comes to visuals. Suspiria, prime example. Inferno to a lesser extent, but also Inferno. Now, if he had made this around between 82 and 84, maybe it would have been much better. But he made this in 07, which some areas that helps him, most areas it doesn't. I mean, okay, the gore looks better, but it's like mid-2000s gore when the intestines just look like wet pink tubing. At least it's practical, because there's plenty of CGI in this as well. But it's not visually interesting. And unfortunately, this was at a time in Argento's career where he was kind of over, being kind of visual and surreal, and just wanted to shoot everything as realistic as possible. And this really isn't the movie to do that with, especially when the first two are very visual. The performances are fine, but the dialogue does suffer. I mean, Argento was never that strong of a writer, especially when it came to dialogue. But, and of course, the CGI is laughable. The actual threats themselves are not that scary. I mean, there's a group of these gothic witches that roam around together in a group. I think we see them at a train station and just around. It looks like a bunch of goth girls dressing up as the Hocus Pocus witches, but the way they're acting, like trying to be like scary and bad, they look like Hell's Grannies from Monty Python, like just kind of like shoving people out of the way and just kind of laughing constantly. There's a couple moments that could have been creepy, but the way it looks is silly. Like, there's a part where Asia Argento, I think she calls her apartment. No, she calls the friend of her mother's, like across the street, and this guy answers, who's under the spell of the Mother of Tears. And he just goes to do like this body snatcher scream. And I don't know if there was CGI to make his mouth big or if it's just like that. But it's just like this. All the lights are on. It looks really silly. But yeah, then there's some horrific parts. I mean, there's a part where when the devastation starts sweeping across Rome, the first thing we see, other than Argento's assistant being maimed and killed, is there's a mother pushing a stroller, and she just picks her baby up and then drops it off the bridge. And we see it, well, it hits the bottom of the bridge, then does that all the way down. We see it land and just sink. So, okay. Then we see a young boy get cannibalized, which I do like how that was lit. All dark, just red lights, just picking guts and shit out of a young kid. It's not afraid to go there. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie doesn't really have much to add to it. And, okay, so there's this excavation. They find a casket, like a small casket shaped urn. The corpse is Mater Lacrimarum. Yeah, I always think I mispronounced that name. Yeah, which is the mother of tears, but we don't know that in the beginning. And the urn has 3 little statues that represents each mother. Suspiriorum, the mother of sighs, Tenebrarum, the mother of darkness, and Lacrimarum, the mother of tears. And then underneath that is this red tunic, this ceremonial tunic with the symbols all around, like the waistline. It's sent to the Museum of Ancient Art in Rome, where Asia Argento plays Sarah. Her boyfriend is the curator, but he's not there. Her assistant, Giselle, is there. They open it, and like Sarah leaves the room to go get a book, and Giselle is attacked by these hulking beings that really maim the hell out of her. I mean, they shove something in her mouth to break her jaw and her teeth. They rip her guts out, drag her away. Lacrimarum's, I guess, earthly kind of presence is that of a baboon, or her familiar is a baboon that then chases Sarah around the museum. And of course, by opening that, it's like this Pandora's box. They've unleashed her, and the plan is to spread pain and darkness and cruelty and tears and to bring on the second fall of Rome and the second, or I guess like the ending of the world. And the second fall of Rome is to be sort of her coming out party. And it's up to Sarah to stop her because she finds out that her parents, who she believes were killed in a car crash, her mother is actually Countess Elisa from Inferno, and she possesses some of the same powers or the same gifts, so she has to figure out who the Mother of Tears is, what she wants, and that's the movie. Other than that, there's some tarot. There's the same Freddy Krueger effect like in the first movie when he comes through the wall, and the wall is kind of like latex, like he doesn't burst through it. That was done practically. It looks great. The remake, the wall is all CGI. It looks terrible. They do it with CGI in this. The ending, of course, she defeats the witch very easily, and then the building crumbles with CGI, and then when they crawl out and they're just outside, it looks like a green screen, but done with CGI, which looks really bad. And okay, so like her boyfriend loses his young son. The witches take him and refuse to give him up unless the investigation is called off, because now the police are looking into all these random acts of violence. But he goes after him anyway. She gets a call from him to help, but she's attacked by these witches at the train station. She goes to see this one priest that her boyfriend has mentioned before, who's a trained exorcist the last one, sort of sanctioned by the Vatican, played by Udo Kier. He's killed by one of his patients because, he has a lot of medical issues. I think he was killed, like, he had, like, acid in his drink or something. This movie was a chore to sit through. I mean, yeah, I say I didn't hate it, but it was hard to be invested. And when I first started watching it, I was incredibly tired, just from work and staying up late to watch stuff to review. I was falling asleep. I could not keep myself awake. And since I did fall asleep, I had to keep going back and rewatching it. But every day I was just still tired and I could not finish it. It was a chore to sit through. So some things I don't remember. But this one woman that was looking after him is named Marta, who was a friend of the Countess. And she's the one that tells her, hey, your mother was this powerful white witch that wounded Suspiriorum, killed Tenebrarum. They mention Susie Bannion is the one that killed Suspiriorum. So that was cool. Actually, when she's on the train station first, before she gets to the priest's home, when she's attacked by the Hell's Grannies, witches, there's this disembodied voice that kind of guides her. She then finds out that's the voice of her mother, which she does appear, Daria Nicolodi does appear as like this white light kind of ghost, but she acts very ghostly, like, you must go, you must save them. And then she gets back home and her possessed husband, her boyfriend, is there. His throat's slit and he's being puppeted by the Mother of Tears. She sets him on fire, and then the spirit of her mother like grabs him, and they seem to like fall into hell together, and then we never see her again through the rest of the movie. Doesn't say what happens. And when she goes over, and like across the street is like where Marta lives with her lesbian lover, which her lover gets messed up because some of the mother's goons, like the bald guy that's on the phone, like, bleh, they have like this thing that you open up, stab them in the eyes. They mess her up quite a bit. But yeah, then she gets killed. And then Sarah has nowhere to go because the news is kind of hinting that she's the suspect. Which, Asia Argento, I know, is a talented actress. I've seen her do some really great acting. Stendhal Syndrome, I still think is her best work. There are moments in this where she does do very well, but it's the dialogue that fails her. And granted, there's movies where I think she's terrible, like Trauma, Dracula. I wouldn't say Land of the Dead, she was that great, but so sadly, this is one of her better performances, but it's not excellent. She goes to this one alchemist who will finally help her. And this was kind of interesting, but they don't do anything super. Perfume sprays this thing on her that renders her, incapacitated. And then he has this huge green round thing with a lighter. And his assistant, who looks like Edward Norton from Red Dragon, has this thing that holds her eye open. And when he looks through it, he sees all these little purple squigglies that will tell him the story of who she is and what she's seen. So, like, he knows who sent her and why she's there, but he still asks her why she's there. And he gives her the book of the history of the three mothers, and written by the guy that built the houses for them. Freiburg for Suspiriorum, New York for Tenebrarum, and Rome for Lacrimarum. Which we got to see sketches of the houses. We got to see the sketch of the Dance Academy from Suspiria, so that was cool. And I don't think they formulate a plan. She just kind of goes back, goes to the house, and, walks through it. Eventually, the detective that's kind of been after her the whole movie is there. He's going to help her. And then they walk into some cruel orgy where there's like a couple making out with barbed wire. There's a woman on all fours with a knife in her back. There's one woman that looks like she's eating the intestines out of the ass of a heavier woman. I don't know what was going on there. Which, okay, this movie should be gorier and more relentless than the other two, because they do make it a point to say that she is the cruelest of the three mothers. So I'll say it delivers there as well by making some of the more gorier, violent, more cruel things to happen. So it delivers there. And then the mother comes out, and of course, yeah, she's hot. She's like, she appears naked, but then she puts the tunic on. And to stop her, Sarah just runs up to her, rips the tunic off, throws it in a fire, and then everything crumbles. That's how easy it was to stop her. Burn the tunic. And then everything crumbles in CGI. This one stone spike from the building falls, careens into the mother, which pins her against the wall, so we get CGI blood everywhere. Her and the detective crawl out. They crawl through this hole. So now Rome is all sunny and pretty, but it looks like a green screen. Like it looks like a matte painting, but there's a fountain going off in the background. And just the way they crawl out, it looks like CGI. And it ends with them just sitting there laughing together. That's the movie. I'm sure there's some finer plot points that I missed. Like, there was a couple of jump scares, like when she has the dream. She has a dream where she gets out of bed and then just this demon figure pops out. And yeah, I really think this movie should have been made between 81 and 85. Because I know there was a lot of sort of that cynical, mean-spirited violence that was put into Tenebrae. Because I think he wanted to do this, but everyone was like, go back to Giallo, go back to Giallo. So he just, it has this very cynical, mean-spirited feeling to it. Tenebrae does. So, because Inferno did not do so well. If he could have channeled that into making Mother of Tears the cruelest of the three mothers, while he was still in his visual filmmaking stage, I think we could have had a decent movie. Now, ironically, yeah, I don't hate this. Do I think it's a bad movie? Abso-fucking-lutely. But do I hate it? Not as much as Dracula, not as much as Phantom of the Opera. I didn't like it as much as Giallo, just because Giallo's not a great movie either, but I'd rather have a movie that's sort of, that shot straight and realistic, that's supposed to be that way, than a follow-up and final chapter of a trilogy that's known for being very visual and have it try to be shot as straight as possible or as realistic, not in his visual stage. And I don't have too much to say because most people, horror fans, Argento fans, have already ranted and raved on this. I don't really know what else I could say. Yeah, it's not even a review I was really looking forward to, because it took me several days to actually be awake enough to watch it. Not because it was boring, even though it was, but because I was so tired and I'm just through watching this. But see, I don't have much more to add. It's it's got practical gore effects, mid 2000 gore effects. Take with that what you will. It's still got a bunch of CGI. It's not the worst he's ever done. It's not. It's not as bad as say Stendhal Syndrome, but at least that's a visual film. I can buy why that's CGI, and for how old it is. You know, it's not. The acting isn't the worst I've seen. It, it's not that great either. Story, I see the potential. Okay, I see he raised the stakes for what this witch is doing. I applaud him for that. It is the most extreme we've seen somewhat happen to people. I mean, the opening to Suspiria is still pretty gnarly, but by and large, the stuff we've seen in this is the cruelest. It's the cruelest mother, so it delivers there. And, and again, ironically enough, the witch was super easy to defeat like the other two. But, and yeah, not much to the story. Fairly easy to follow, and I mean, the only thing I can really say was maybe if they I can't really say fine-tuned it anymore because it went through like 3 different people or groups of people, the script did. Yeah, if he had done this probably 20 to 25 years sooner, I think we could have had a pretty solid film. Didn't hate it, but it's still a bad movie. It's definitely in the bottom 5 for me for Argento. I'd probably put Family Opera, Dracula, this, Giallo. And just counting his directorial films, not counting Masters of Horror either, then probably The Card Player. Those are probably his bottom 5. Only because I don't remember shit from Family Opera, but a lot of stuff was stupid. At least Dracula had the Hammer aesthetic to kind of appreciate. Then this, then Giallo. But, yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's Argento's Mother of Tears. So, even though I don't own Family Opera, I've reviewed it. So the only thing I haven't reviewed is Two Evil Eyes. But all the ones he's done solo by himself, that's not an anthology, I now have reviewed. So go check that playlist out. The only other Italian film I planned on getting to was Hand That Feeds the Dead. I'm not sure when I'll get to this. And I still wanted to get to the French and Belgian film Strange Color Your Body's Tears, Giallo homage. And I will do a few Christmas movies before Christmas. And I still have episode 5 of Dexter coming up. I've had some things come up in the past week, schedule changes. It's got my sleep cycle all messed up, so I'm tired, but Argento's Mother of Tears, thank you for watching.